asked me to talk about how I do international virtual collaborations, and I have been doing them since I think 1990. I have been at UNM since 1989, and so I have been engaged in doing these different kinds of collaborations. So first of all, I thought before I talk about one of my collaborations in more detail, that I will talk to you about the history of my collaborations. And you sort of learn from every collaboration you do, and then you come to this time when you feel, okay, I think I can do these things quite successfully. So the first collaboration that I did was called the Global Ed Project, and this meant global education. We wanted graduate students to work collaboratively to discuss issues related to distance education. Those were the courses I was teaching in the OLIT program. We wanted to run specific projects for them so that they could, collaborate, share perspectives, see how a specific problem would be addressed in different universities. So for the Global Ed Project, in the 1990s we didn't have all these web CDs and groupware. So we used the listserv. It was even possible to do this over listserv. And so what we did was I had the universities that participated in this project were University of Oklahoma, University of Wisconsin-Madison, San Diego State University, University of Wyoming. This is because I knew my colleagues at these institutions were also teaching similar courses. And because we were teaching similar courses, we were able to put this Global Ed project as one of the course requirements. And part of the success of that project is related to the fact that this was a course requirement and students felt that there was reason to be involved in the project. So I think sometimes when you do collaborations, this is one of the things to really consider very carefully. To what degree does it help students to also gain the learning outcomes they're supposed to gain during this course that you're teaching. So in that particular project, the Global Ed, the first time I ran it, I had one international institution, and that was the University of Wollongong in Australia. The second time I had Anadolu University in Turkey. And one of the things I learned from running this project, so we ran it for the course of a semester. There was a very specific project that they had to do. In the first one, we had like free-form discussions, defining distance education, like very open-ended stuff. The second time we ran it, we ran a very specific research project. They had to collect research data on how distance education was being implemented. I really cannot remember exactly what the project was about, but it was a common research project that each institution ran, collected the data, and shared with each other. Now, what I learned from this particular project was that students will engage if they see how it's related to what they're learning. So when you're doing a collaboration, that is the first key thing. It is also important that you have a really good collaboration with your colleagues who will be running their end of the project. The directions you give, the instructions you give are really important. The third thing was training in technology. At that time, internet was just beginning, and many people didn't know how to use the internet. Many people didn't even know how to use computers. And so we had to be sure that they were trained at their sites in order to be able to really interact with each other. And so those were some of the main factors that really was a key consideration when we did these projects. Now we also ran some research data on this. One of the things that we wanted to find out was, what were some of the predictors of learner satisfaction in these learning environments? And so we collected data. It was a survey-based data. We collected data from all these institutions that work with us. And one of the strongest predictors of learner satisfaction was the concept called social presence. And social presence is the degree to which people feel socially connected in mediated communication. So like when you're using a computer, the regular nonverbal cues that we have when we see people face to face are not there. And social presence is also a factor of two aspects. One aspect is the intimacy of the medium, that is the degree to which the medium can convey things like nonverbal cues, intonation, etc. And if you really look at the medium itself of computer-mediated communication on a listserv, the social presence is quite low because it really communicates only through text. And however, one of the things we really realized was that the dialogue that emerged from these discussions really helped people to connect with each other, even though the technical infrastructure like a listserv wasn't the best thing to use. So that was one of the studies we did, and then there were several other studies too. But what relates to the cultural aspect of these global collaborations is also very interesting. For example, when we were, when you engage in discussions on a listserv, people do go off on topics of their own. All of a sudden, because many of the universities involved here were US institutions, they started talking about football. And then there was this long discussion about the Tar Heels, and this is the North Carolina football team. I too didn't know what it was. But then, at that time when this discussion was going on, the people in Australia were very quiet. They didn't come online. They seemed to be reticent. And when there is silence online, I always wonder why there is silence, because it could be that they are not very happy about what's going on. So I wrote to the instructor and I asked, what's going on? Nobody is participating from your side. Are you on vacation? What's going on? And he said, nobody knows what this discussion is about. Nobody knows what Tar Heels are. No, we don't have the context for you. And so one of the things that I have since then taught my students is, when you write a message, provide the context. I'm sure as language learners, you know this difference in communication styles between low context and high context. Hall has talked quite a bit about it. So this was true. In US we are generally low context. We try to put the meaning in the message itself. In other cultures, in Australia, it's difficult to determine because all of these countries are made up of immigrants anyway. But if you are working with South America or Asia, a lot of the meaning is in the surrounding context. And you have to make an effort to actually explain that online, because now people don't have that visual context. So context was a key thing that I learned in this first Global Ed project that I did. So I think in order to do that, what you need? You need time, but more than time, you need passion. You need to feel that this is an important experience for your students. And our students really enjoyed this simply because they felt, here was our classroom now opening up to the outside world. We are talking with students at the University of Wisconsin, we are talking with Australia. Look at all these perspectives that we are seeing and what, in terms of what we are trying to learn about. And one thing that I also want to say that didn't work very well for us was during the second try, I told you, had a common research project that we had people do. And that particular research project, because every institution did the same research project and they started sharing data. After the first two universities had shared their research projects, it became a little bit old. And so people started losing interest because you're seeing the same things. So if I run the concept of a research project again, I would do different research projects for different institutions so that you're all learning something new and you won't be bored by the same kind of data. So that was one of the things that I learned from that second activity that we did. But activities also have to be goal-oriented. So this is one of my learning experiences, that there must be a definite outcome, there must be a definite purpose in doing these activities. One of the purposes, other than actually people sharing multiple perspectives, solving a common problem, was the fact that they also needed to learn how to moderate online discussions. That was one of the learning experiences for my students, because these people are going to be professionals in distance learning. And moderating an online discussion is very different from moderating a face-to-face or facilitating a face-to-face discussion. So that was a learning experience. And moderating meant you have to move the group towards the group goals. You had to build the learning community. You have to see that you had a cohesive group of learners. And then you have to help them facilitate the group in the social construction of knowledge, how people negotiate meaning among themselves and then create something new. So I had to teach students how to do summaries. I taught them how to do summaries that are more summative in nature, summaries that are more query forcing. So I had to train them in these techniques of moderating online. So there was quite a bit of training that had to go on at each site. I think the moderator training, I did it online with all the groups, with all the institutions. But the technical training of actually getting people online, learning how to use the computer, learning how to use the internet at that time had to be done separately at the institutions. So given our success in this project, I felt, wow, this is really opening up opportunities for learning across countries. So second project I did was like a professional development experience. Now the Global Ed was a classroom exercise, it's a class exercise. The other project I did was a professional development experience that was run as a pre-conference to the World Conference on Distance Education in 1995. So the conference was being held in Birmingham, England. But very few people can attend those conferences because they are so expensive. So one of the organizers of the conference, Terry Anderson from Canada, he said, I would like to run a pre-conference, again using a listserv because that's what we had at that time. And he said, well, I'm going to ask the speakers at the conference to really do a 1-week discussion session online on the topic that they are going to deliver. Well, I was going to talk about interaction online. And so the topic that was given to me was interaction. I had 7 days to facilitate. So I teach a course called distance learning course at that time. Now it's called e-learning course design. At that time, distance ed course design. So I came to class and I said, guess what? I just have a task to do. How about designing a professional development exercise for people all around this world, we don't know who will come in, on the concept of interaction. And then they said, then we all decided, well, let's do a debate and see how a debate would work. Now remember that debate is really a Western way of Western argumentative style. Now we thought about how would this work with all the global audiences that would be part of this. And we thought, well, anyway, let's try. So one of the main things we had to overcome there was the time zones. Because for a debate, you have to have 1 day for the affirmative, or some period for the affirmative argument, for the some period for the negative argument, affirmative, argument again, negative argument, so it goes back and forth. So, you know, the cross-examination periods, all of that. So you have to really think through how you take asynchronous time, which was what we were using through a listserv, and compartmentalize it to almost the synchronous time period. How we did was, we thought, if we ask everybody to put their clocks on Greenwich Mean Time, then everybody would be on that day, posting on that day. So you had to calculate, we had a formula for calculation of Greenwich Mean Time. And we would say, if you're on this time zone, this is the day you post affirmative. This time zone, this is the day you post negative. All right, and all the participants were instructed to follow the guidelines of participating in the debate on the specific day. So if they are supporting the affirmative arguments, they had to post it on this day, negative on another day. I ran the affirmative side. I was the head of the affirmative side, and one of my doctor students, Connie Lowe, was my summarizer for the affirmative day. So the day's postings would be by midnight. Soon after midnight, we would that specific day, we would summarize the discussions and then post the summary. So you had to be up like at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning sometimes to do this. The negative person who led the negative side was Greg Kersley at George Washington University. And Maury Collins was his summarizer, and she was from Penn State. So we could actually have people all over the globe play different roles. And I didn't think it really would work. I didn't think people would actually put their clocks on Greenwich Mean Time to participate in this conference. But they did. Partly, and this was a totally voluntary experience. This was partly because these professionals were really interested in distance education. It was becoming like a global phenomenon. They were really interested to find out how to understand the concept of interaction. And I can remember our debate topic was no interaction, no education. That was a topic that we had to argue for and against. And at the end of this debate, a few people posted how much they appreciated it, and one person from the University of Washington said, "This is better than any face-to-face conference experience I've had, for which I have had to spend a lot of money. I did this from home." And then we began analyzing the interactions that happened, because we were wondering, well, why did they say that this was a great experience? One was the people involved were professionals in the field, so they knew the field and were graduate students studying the field. And so you had like the cream of the crop involved. Most of the postings actually came from Anglophone countries and people who spoke English fluently. So that is sort of given. We did have quite a few posts from Latin America, and I know they had time problems actually posting on the correct day, but I gave them permission, and they, and posted it for them with a little note saying, sorry, this is late. We had also quite a few from Asia. Asia also speaks English fairly well as a second language. And it really was a success. So Connie Lowe and I and then Terry decided to analyze all the interactions of this debate. And we really figured out how people constructed knowledge, and developed this model to explain social construction of knowledge that is being utilized now all over the world to examine how people socially construct knowledge when we discuss things online. What we initially saw was, because of the affirmative postings, everybody agreed. So they shared their experience, they shared their readings, knowledge from readings, they shared their experience, all of that. Second day, because of the negative side, negative arguments, it introduced this concept of cognitive dissonance. People were now being challenged about the ideas that they were posting. And so there was disagreements, etc., related to the affirmative side's posting. Now the purpose of the debate is really to win the argument on your side, whether affirmative or negative. But surprisingly, what was happening in this debate was that people were trying to negotiate meaning. And we really didn't want them to negotiate meaning because we had to win the argument. We are not negotiating, we are trying to win this argument on our side. But it was very difficult for us as debate leaders. We also found that online we have absolutely no control because people will do what they want. And they negotiated and they really created new meaning, new ideas. They even went on to testing them, figuring out how to apply them at their institutions, and then actually proposed further testing and modifications of the new learning that emerged. And so this went through this whole cycle of social construction of knowledge, which was just amazing, in a format where you really didn't want them to negotiate. That was really one of our most interesting learning. So I'm going to stop there now for a little while before I explain another project and ask if you have any questions, any similar experiences you'd like to share.
I have a question. So in this debate, basically what you're saying is that people, participants are motivated. So
it was volunteer. I mean, nobody was asked to. They didn't have to, but they were motivated because it was something new that they were doing. Yeah.
So there has to be that aspect of motivation. If we were going to include students in an activity, then there would have to be some kind of motivation.
Right.
Would that include you have to do it? Or would that be more than just you have to do it?
Right. What I do is in my classes when the Global Ed project, it was written as a have to do exercise. It was written as an exercise, but the exercise was such that they gained certain skills they couldn't have gained elsewhere. So if this is just an add-on, why do it? People are not going to see its value. So, but if it is an exercise that is really going to enhance some type of learning, then they are going to be motivated to do it. So, Pam, weren't you in the one we did, the project we did with Morocco?
Yes.
You were part of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
See, that was written in also as an exercise and this was soon after September 11th, and I really felt that we really needed to open a few opportunities for our students to learn about the Muslim world, and that the media wasn't going to control everything we learned about that world. And so I wanted students to actually engage in dialogue with students, in this instance Morocco, because I had a colleague there who was working, she's an American married to a Moroccan, but she was teaching there. She was teaching communication classes there. But her classes were undergraduate and my classes were graduate. So we matched these graduate students with the undergraduates so that they could, collaborate. And can you remember can you remember anything about that experience?
Well, I remember it was a really positive experience because we were able to connect with people in another culture who were so much like us. That was the overwhelming. It was so surprising. It was Fez. They did a weird little Fez. It snowed. It was on desert. It was just like they sent us pictures of their house and where they vacation, and we'd send them pictures, and it was all very similar. It was really nice. It was a great experience.
Right.
Is it a language class or communication class? What kind of course is that?
The one that particular class that we had the Morocco project is my class on cross-cultural issues in adult learning. And so this was one of the online experience that I had integrated to my face-to-face class. So sort of, in this concept of blended learning where we do face-to-face and online, this was this online experience that was part of the face-to-face class. And actually the pictures, they shared them only at the end. Remember, we were not going to share pictures at the beginning. Partly because pictures can sometimes develop a few preconceived notions. So the instructor in Morocco and I, we decided that we would not ask students to share pictures of themselves, but they could talk about their backgrounds. And one of the very interesting things that emerged was how they introduced themselves online. They would say, I am from Fez and I'm a Fassi. And in Morocco, and I did my sabbatical in Morocco after that experience, I spent about 6 months there. So I learned the real cultural connotations of these things that happen actually online. Because in Morocco, people identify themselves with regions. If you are a Fassi from Fez, you are considered fairly high in the social hierarchy, because that is considered the center of learning. So people actually identify their regionality when they introduce themselves, which our students found surprising. Subsequently, I did a similar experience for that same class, cross-cultural issues in adult learning, with China, with the University of Beijing in China. And there, what we did was, we wanted them to try a negotiation. And we had this specific software, negotiation software, that was developed by Greg Kirsten, I think. And essentially, what they negotiated on was a recording studio contract. It had nothing to do with cross-cultural learning. I wanted them to just, learn about another culture, learn about the people, and then get into a negotiation exercise. Because I teach this class in cross-cultural issues in adult learning, one of the things that I want students to learn is how to interact with other cultures and engage in coming to agreement on certain things. So the concept of negotiation is important. So I decided we would work with China because, at that time, China was also, very interested in developing collaborations through the internet. And so first, for this exercise, the goal was to really give them the negotiation experience using the specific negotiation software. But prior to putting them in the negotiation, I had them actually talk to each other on WebCT. And then they introduced each other on WebCT. We discussed some class issues, like we had 2 class topics that we discussed on WebCT together. And then I put them in the negotiation exercise, because I think if they didn't know each other, maybe they may not have felt comfortable doing the negotiation, because you have to really disagree and agree with each other. But for the introductions, I had learned that the Chinese did not self-introduce themselves like we do. That it's hard for them to present themselves publicly among a group. So in a collectivist society, you generally don't want to stand up and say, oh, this is me, I've done this, I'm from here, etc. So what I did was, I had one of my students pair up with one of the Chinese students at Beijing University. They had to get to know each other online through email, and they had to introduce each other. So I reduced the emphasis on them to have to self-introduce themselves by doing that. And that worked really well. It sort of developed the camaraderie between the 2 groups really fast. And then they were able to go and do the negotiation. Now, our preconceived notion was that the Chinese students would be very polite and perhaps they might not openly disagree with our students. That wasn't so. And so this was good to also, dismantle some of these preconceived notions and stereotypes we have of people. What we also had to realize was, our concept of China was that China from the time of the Cultural Revolution, and the concept of Confucian values, etc., and that they would not openly disagree. Oh, they were quite different. Some of them were very forceful. They really played the negotiation exercise really well. and in terms of winning the argument, some of them won the argument. And so we also realized that some of these students were new, China is changing really fast. And so they were also students who were becoming, were thinking more from a Western standpoint rather than from the predominantly Confucian value system. So this was a really good experience for my students, because then they realized, oh, so if we are doing a negotiation in China, we really cannot go by what the books have said. We really have to interact with the people to know how they would react. That was a big learning experience for them. And you couldn't have done that, because if you read the articles that we were providing them, their description of Chinese cultural values was quite different to what they experienced online, these students. So that was a really good experience as well. So any questions?
Actually, if I may, just in this regard, we just recently read an article in my class about the American Chinese online experience, and it's interesting that what you actually emphasize, that there is this preconceived notion of politeness in Chinese culture, and we did actually see that in this particular study. I didn't do the study; we just read an article finding, and we were discussing the findings. The situation with those particular participants, American and Chinese students being in China, Americans being here, was that they entered a specific relationship of mentor-mentee with the American students. So the American students were the mentors. They were supposed to host the Chinese students who were supposed to come to the United States for an exchange program. So this online collaboration was kind of like the preparation for them coming here, and the Chinese students always perceive their American peers as their mentors. So the mentor-mentee relationship actually predetermined the nature of this online collaboration, which was extremely polite. The Chinese students were extremely intimidated by the Americans, by their English. Of course. And they tried very hard to imitate them. They tried really hard to meet their expectations, the expectations of the Americans. So but that's a different type of situation, interaction, I guess.
Right. And I suddenly realized Beijing University, which used to be Peking University, is China's premier institution. They have the cream of the crop. These students are really well versed in English. I mean, their English was really pretty good. And so we found a very different situation there. But with another institution, we might have found what you found. So I think, just trying these things out are great, because it provides our students these windows to the rest of the world and interaction where they don't have to spend a whole lot of money to do a study abroad program. For many of our adult learners who really cannot leave home, jobs, family, and leave, these experiences, online experiences, are really wonderful. Any others? Yeah.
This might be too sort of theoretical, but I was just curious what you think of sort of the social construction model of knowledge and all these things we've been talking about in light of what we have now. Right, so we see the discourse in listservs and emails, and that's drastically shifted over the last 10 years. What do you think sort of if you now, or how that might be revised or not, or?
All right. Everybody knows what social construction of knowledge is all about. So let me define what constructivism and social constructivism is briefly, so that we are on the same page. So in social constructivism, we talk about knowledge being constructed through the exchange of meanings, perspectives, and negotiation of meaning between people. So we are constructing new knowledge and making sense of the world through the dialogue we have with each other. So in order for social construction of knowledge to happen, you have to have this very good dialogue to happen. In constructivism, the difference between constructivism and social constructivism, they are very similar, is that in constructivism we say that individuals develop their own knowledge constructions on new meaning through a variety of experiences. They can, read, they can talk with others. It involves also, collaborative learning. But constructivism is more concerned about changes happening in an individual's mind through different input media. Social constructivism through collaborative experiences. Here's my experience after teaching online for a long time, is that I believe that collaborative learning has a lot of value, that learning together with each other has a lot of value. It's very difficult to facilitate, very difficult to plan ahead and do online. But if you can do it, I believe that it's a much richer learning experience for the student than individually designed learning experiences. Partly because they are learning skills that are not directly related to the subject matter itself, but they are also learning about how to work with others. In my online classes, the social constructivism is the theory base for designing my online classes. And I'm going to show you a model that I developed. We developed for designing learning environments to develop wise communities online, We call it WISCOM, WISCOM. And so I'm going to help, demonstrate that, show you that diagram in a little while. I really believe that the projects that they turn in, the group projects that they turn in, collaborative projects they turn in, are much better than the individual projects they do. And I have seen this over several classes. So I have actually now moved to this learning through collaborations rather than through, and assessing collaborative learning rather than just individual learning. There is a lot of theory to support it. I had a few slides on theory, but I decided maybe this is not a theory talk, so I took them out. But Lev and Wenger talked about developing communities of practice, and Vygotsky's work has been like the grounding work for collaborative learning, as well as some of the more recent work on group cognition. Stahl's work on group cognition, how that when groups get together and share their perspectives and learn something new, that is part of what has evolved in terms of group cognition, and that this cognition is shared by group members. Then there is another theory called distributed cognition, and distributed cognition is that cognition is distributed not only in the mind of individuals but in the artifacts and tools that we use. So that, for example, if I use a wiki to develop a paper versus a word processor, those tools are going to mediate the difference in the way that I do the project. So the tools that we use also help us in certain ways and mediate the activities we do with them. So Vygotsky talked a lot about tools and the importance of tools in people's learning processes. Then another very important concept that Vygotsky talked about was the concept of zone of proximal development, called ZPD. And that is when you mentor an expert and novice, work together to mentor a novice, so that when the mentor comes up to that level where the mentor can perform on their own, that the expert actually reduces or takes away that expertise, so that you give the mentor then the opportunity to perform the function. Out of that has developed several other concepts like cognitive apprenticeship. Then situated learning is about actually doing real world problems, giving them real world tasks. I teach a course called Culture and Global E-Learning, and one of the things that I get them to do is that they have to actually develop a e-learning plan for a developing country or for one of our communities here in New Mexico, where they have really learned the culture and developed an e-learning solution for an issue that they have. And so that involves them actually working with mentors, and I use mentoring quite a bit. I use this concept of electronic mentors, so e-mentors quite a bit. And that has really facilitated a lot of the discussion, a lot of the learning process as well. So let me show you now that we are on BISCOM, what the model is about. Do we have internet access, Pat? Do you think we have?
I think we do.
Okay, I can call up my class and show you one module that I do, which is also a negotiation exercise. But let me show you first BISCOM first. And how do I get this on this slideshow? How do I do this? Hey, Don. Yeah, I see you. I got it. So yeah, just click on that.
Click on that.
Yeah, and it takes it.
It's just a different swap display.
Oh, swap displays. Okay.
Okay, this is a weird way of.
Okay, good. So this is the BISCOM model.
Oh.
It's on top.
It did swap displays.
Up there. You have to do it up there. And just do it that way.
Oops, I did it wrong.
Oh, you did wrong.
The mouse will just switch to that screen.
Yeah, but it's. You do it.
Okay, let you do.
Only because I just did this in my class yesterday.
All right. Oh, okay. So this BISCOM model we actually developed it here in one of our doctoral classes, is that, when you are designing for online, many of the design models that we have used for traditional face-to-face instruction doesn't work too well. So because we are considering really network learning. And so I feel for social construction of knowledge to happen, it's really important that you develop your wide community. So many of the activities that I do at the beginning of my classes, my graduate classes, is about developing that community. So the first week is orientation, and in orientation I don't give them any activities related, like there are no graded activities. All they are doing is learning about each other and then navigating the online environment, etc. So community building is key, and there are many, lots of icebreakers and things that I run that build community. In fact, one icebreaker that I run is called the riskiest thing I have done in my life. So they have to start with the riskiest thing I have done in my life is, and then they talk about it. And that just builds community, and so they can see what others have done. Oh, I had a similar experience, and so they begin dialoguing with each other. In all my classes, I have a section called the virtual cafe, where they can just go and do their social interaction piece if they want to do that. But some of the activities that I run, I get them, to watch a YouTube video. The machine is us, and I have them, discuss this video. So easy activities that just build the learning community. And then for the community to function well, you have to provide them with mentoring and learner support. So I'm very big on who the mentors are. I consider myself as a mentor too in these classes, but at the same time I have others who are mentors. I bring in people from the community who work as mentors. So, and I also make the people from extended university who work with me on my online classes mentors, because they also mentor them on the use of technology, design, etc. And supporting the learner in terms of, they need to know definitely, how do I get help when I have a technical problem? Who can help me with my Luminate web conferencing, all of that. So that is also clearly laid out. And then knowledge innovation is actually, helping to generate knowledge and the sharing of knowledge and the preservation of knowledge. So in my classes, I always have them, after they have developed a product, they go into a section called knowledge artifacts, where they post what they have developed. And so through this, we want to really facilitate transformational learning. And so this is how the learning process happens with this model, with the WISCOM model. We call it a cycle of inquiry. So my modules or the learning activities actually start with a case or a problem or an issue or a question that they have to address. Then we ask them to, and I do it in groups, you can also do it individually if you want, if you are more of an individually focused learner. Here in the small groups that I set up, they have to first of all initially explore this question, figure out what they know, and develop a set of learning issues related to what they don't know. And then we have resources and perspectives that they can look at in terms of what we have provided, and others that they go and look at to figure out what they didn't know. And then in the community, they share the resources and perspectives, reflect and reorganize their ideas, and develop the solution to the question or the problem they have been given. And then they negotiate and preserve it and provide feedback to the products developed by each other. So that's the learning cycle I take them through. And I was going to also talk about, let's see, this screen is a little bit, let's see. This was an experience. I'm going to leave the PowerPoint with you, but I'm just going to talk a little bit about it. This I used Moodle, and one of the things I did was in 2007, I took a leave of absence from UNM and I went to Sri Lanka. I'm originally from Sri Lanka, because the Ministry of Education there was going to set up a national online distance education system. And they had a Canadian consulting company bring in all these Canadian consultants, and some of the consultants had not really worked out. So they had to, the Sri Lankan Minister of Education requested that I be hired, so they hired me, and I managed to negotiate leave, and I left. And I was in Sri Lanka for 1 year in 2007. The major thing I did was to train a university faculty and professionals in organizations like the Library Association, the Bankers Institute, etc., on how to actually facilitate online learning. And I developed this learning program for them in Moodle. It was a blended format where I did face-to-face and online components. But one of the major online components I did was an inquiry-based learning exercise, where they had to learn how to do an inquiry-based learning activity and solve a problem online. So I had a role play, a problem-based role play, problem solving, and case-based reasoning. Those were the 3 inquiry formats I chose. And they had to solve, like for the role play, they had to solve the traffic problem in the city of Colombo. And because I had people in my audience from so many different institutions, I had to find a problem that was common to them. So role play was the traffic problem. They had to solve the traffic problem in the city. And the case-based reasoning was they had to find a solution for street children in the city of Colombo. And the problem solving one was how to clean garbage, how to have a better solution for garbage, the cleaning of garbage in the city. And then I was seated there as I was developing this. And then I thought, wow, this is such a great experience for my students to be involved in this cross-cultural activity. And they know how to facilitate interactive learning activities. So why don't I have them as mentors for my activity, my training in Sri Lanka? So I just wrote to my students, most of them doc students, and I said, who would like to volunteer to be a mentor? This is what I'm doing in Sri Lanka. Who would like to do it? And amazingly, quite a number said they would like to. And I had some of my best students volunteering to be mentors for this exercise. And that's how we got this great e-mentoring experience going. So I have the slides here, and sometime later, if you're interested, I can come and talk more about it. But right now, we are doing a huge research project based on the data set that we collected, because we had like several, like 12 rounds of tutor mentor training we were involved in, and then after that, the people I trained in Sri Lanka are now doing it. And so we had this big cross-cultural research team, and we met last night. We meet Thursday nights, and we meet at 9:30 our time, because I have one of my students in Afghanistan right now. And then Sri Lanka, it's like 9 o'clock in Sri Lanka when it's 9:30 at night here. And so we had this like 2-hour discussion starting at 9:30 at night on Skype to discuss our research. And we are presenting a paper in Sri Lanka based on that research. So now I have to find a few money for my students to go there. So, but these are things that really develop out of this international collaboration. So one thing is, if you have a real passion for it, go for it. It's not that difficult to do. It takes a lot of planning time, but the rewards are really astounding in terms of the kinds of experiences you can provide your students.